Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Happy New Year's Eve, everyone. We got a good topic? Let's do it. Who's the scariest person you know in real life? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Guy who was in my friend group in high school. We were kind of the weird, geeky kids, but this guy was on a totally different level. He would go cruising around and look for little roadside memorials that people around here will put up when a loved one is killed in a car crash. Generally, they consist of photos, stuffed animals, saint candles, and maybe something seasonal for a holiday. This guy would check out the photos to see if the victim was a cute girl, and if so, would steal the photo and add it to his collection. He had a dozen or so that he kept in his wallet, like your grandma carries around to show her friends. He knew all of these dead girls' names, personal details from obituaries, yearbooks, whatever he could find. He would talk about these girls like they were his girlfriends. I met this new girl named Jenny. We're going to get together this weekend. Sometimes he took the stuffed animals from the memorials as well, but only if he thought they had actually belonged to the girls. How could he tell, you ask? He would smell them. I still wonder how many young girls he's had chained up in a basement somewhere. My grandma. She was part of the Croatian resistance during World War II and would lure soldiers into the woods for them to be ambushed and murdered. She helped burn down a barn full of Nazis. She eventually fled to Tangiers, where she stabbed a guy to death who tried to abuse her. She then eventually earned enough money to make it to America, where she settled in northern Minnesota. Again, someone tried to abuse her on her walk home after work, and she bit so hard on his lower lip and pulled it that it basically peeled the skin down to his chin. I've seen her scare away wolves and bears with cooking pans. She smoked a pack and drank a pint of brandy a day until she died. She was just some tiny old lady, but she scared the hell out of me. I once had a job at a company that employed a murderer as a security guard. Obviously, before he was known to be a murderer. He seemed like a fairly nice but rather moody young man. While I was working there, a child in the broader community disappeared from her home one evening, and it was all over the news by the next morning. I got into work, and there he was at his post, grinning silently, while his colleague explained that the missing girl was from the neighborhood, and that he had stayed up late assisting police and neighbors in the search. Unfortunately, they had found no sign of the girl, and she remained missing for more than a year. I'm sure by now you figured out that this young security guard was the one who took that poor child and killed her, and what's more, he stashed her body in a cold storage on the premises of my workplace. This gruesome fact was revealed some years after he left this job, when he casually confessed the crime to his girlfriend. It was later discovered that he had also killed an older woman at least a year before he was hired at my company as a security guard. He wasn't scary in his manner ever. That's what makes my memory of him so scary now. This is my mom's story. She passed away 3 years ago, so I'm sharing it for her. For a little background, my aunt lost the love of her life to a genetic heart condition that killed him at just 38 years old. Jump forward 7 years, and my grandmother and all of my aunt's friends are constantly telling her that she needs to get over Jack and meet a new man. My aunt goes to a bar one night, and it leads to a whirlwind romance that, after 3 months, leads to her getting engaged. My mom and dad go to the engagement party, and when my mom meets my aunt's fiancé, Harry, she immediately dislikes him. Uncle Harry looked a lot like a young Robert Redford. He was the life of the party. He could crack jokes and have the whole room roaring with laughter, and in his words, he never met a stranger at a checkout line. He was friendly, funny, and a good listener. My mom left the engagement party early because she could not fake happiness with the soon-to-be married couple. My aunt got mad, of course, and grabbed my mom's arm as my mom tried to leave. My mom turned around in front of everyone at the party and said, "If you marry that man, he's going to kill you." A little over 5 years later, my cousin from my aunt's previous marriage comes home from spending the night with a friend to find Harry smashing my aunt's head against the floor. My cousin grabbed his hunting rifle and shot and killed Harry. How she survived and did not wind up with serious brain damage is beyond me. It came out, while police talked to my cousin, that Harry started brutally abusing my aunt about a year into their marriage. It is just crazy how we think we can spot an evil person when we see them, but that's not always the case. Somehow, though, my mom immediately sensed that Harry was not who he pretended to be. My dad was. He was a hoarder, like on TV. Someone gave me a cordless drill for a birthday, and he found out about it. He wanted to borrow it, so I said okay. Fast forward 6 months, and I asked him to return it. He did, but the creepy thing was I saw him drive up to my house beforehand and look at my windows. He couldn't see me looking out. He had the coldest, nastiest look on his face. He was beyond pissed, into dangerous territory. You just can't see a person the same way after you've been given a glimpse inside. It makes me chilled even now. I was talking about this with my family last night. One of my aunt's husbands is the kind of person with evil in his heart that reflects on his appearance. That guy kills the grass he stands on. He exudes so much malice. He beats her, and used to beat his children constantly. That is, until they grew up and could stand up to his gigantic ass. He's unkind to everyone he meets, and no one or anything is ever good enough for him, except his own relatives, who are all narcissistic, entitled people. He's a cold, mean, manipulative, bully control freak who believes cruelty is honesty, can't ever do any wrong, believes he is a righteous one, and maintains a facade of calmness. But if you bother to look twice, you can see he is a spring waiting to kick off. He will resort to threats and then violence if people call him out and tell him to F off with his bullshit. The kind of person dogs growl at when they see him, and kills off any harmony by walking into any place. I truly hope my aunt leaves this waste of life. We've tried to help her, but she sees the good in him. He is a school director. How he's held on to that job can only be explained by how much of an asshole he is. I work at a top security mental hospital. I know a few ex-cult leaders, killers, and cannibals, and lots of interesting people. One of the most dangerous guys we have is a one-on-one with a PNA, a nurse's assistant. One-on-one means that he can never be unsupervised. He gets in fights and always has a fresh injury. For a while, he wore this weird kind of helmet that I think was protecting a head wound. He's actually not such a bad guy. He's silly and likes to joke around. He just needs his medicine and extra help. I get a fist bump from him whenever we meet. My stepbrother. He stabbed someone to death over $20, and that is just one point in the long, horrific story that is his life. He's been this way since I met him at 5 years old. For anyone curious, I'm pretty certain there was no trauma or anything that caused him to be this way. His brother's a great person, but yeah, some people are just born wrong. We had this longshoreman who called himself Indian. He had a bad temper, was 6 feet, weighed 210, was mean, and was not especially bright. He was union, but his supervisor was scared of him, so he was hard to get rid of. Finally, he got in a fight with a crane operator and was replaced. On the river, you don't mess with the crane operator. I had inherited Indian, so I had only had to deal with him for a few months, but word got around that he thought it was my fault that he was let go. A few months later, I heard that Indian was in jail. He had gotten involved in a bar fight and hurt some guy. By coincidence, I had a check for Indian. It was some deposit on returned equipment, maybe $300. I knew the sheriff in the area. I asked him to find out what Indian wanted us to do with the money. A few days later, the sheriff called. He said I could either mail it or bring it to him to deposit. It was only about a half an hour away, so I decided to take a ride to see Indian. I gave him the check and asked him how his case was going. Not good. The guy had a broken neck and a fractured skull. When I was almost finished, I asked him what kind of Indian he was. He said he didn't give himself that effing name. Some boat pilot did. He was full-blooded Italian. I haven't seen him in over a decade, but I used to get rides to work from a guy who liked to tell stories of his criminal background. He robbed 7 banks along a single stretch of road outside Cleveland in the 90s, just got out after a 20-year stint in federal prison, He even showed pictures of the cartel boss and mob boss he befriended in prison. He used to tell me how he kept a mask and a pipe in the car in case he needed them. I figured he meant a weed pipe since he smoked a lot of the K2 stuff because he was on parole and couldn't smoke the real stuff. Then he whipped out a lead pipe and a Halloween mask. Then there's the story of him gutting a bouncer in front of a club because he was being a dick and refusing to let him back inside. Never met a guy who scared me as much as that dude, especially when he got a chihuahua from a kennel that had kennel cough. He used to talk about the ways he'd murder the original owner because of how he knew it was abused before. He was really sweet with that dog, even gave it a baby voice when he dropped me off with my girlfriend after work.
I think scary comes in all shapes and sizes as described in this topic. Probably the scariest person I know is much more psychologically frightening than physically. Not an imposing threat physically at all, but can really mess with people just by words and actions. So be careful out there.
I met Rachel for the first time at my buddy's house. She was giving someone a shitty basement tattoo. Cute, petite, dark hair and eyes. We hit it off and started hooking up a couple of times a week. I even let her meet my kid. I began to notice some drug issues, but I kept my shit separate and enjoyed spending time with her until we both moved on after 7 months or so. The story was on the news for about 30 seconds before my phone started ringing from a bunch of friends asking if I knew my ex cut up some dude and left his body in a steel drum in her garage. No more crazy hot girls for me.
My ex-Marine, got my name tattooed on him a month after meeting me. Expert in interrogations, he then used that to convince me of many things while he destroyed my identity slowly over time. He physically assaulted me many times and got away with it due to the isolation level he had kept me at. If someone didn't hear our last argument, I would be gone today. He also was diagnosed with schizophrenia during our marriage and refused to take his medicine. He had delusions of being followed and of being poisoned by me. I still have a lot of therapy to get through. It's already been 4 years since the divorce. The guy who lived in the same house as me a long while back, he was always working out in the yard with an iron bar, pull-ups and planks, and swinging that thing till it hummed. Once I was brushing my teeth in my apartment, and he came into the bathroom, shut the door behind me, and started talking about effing up my ideology, breaking me and such. I don't remember what I said that got him to leave. In times of profound stress, I often say the right thing without recalling what it was. I do know after he left, I became aware that the whole time I'd spoken, I still had a mouthful of half-brushed toothpaste. I started looking my apartment door and moved out ASAP. 30 years ago, I was a wine buyer for a group of restaurants. The head of national sales for a huge wine, a worldwide company, lived in town, and he would occasionally drop by, usually accompanied by his beautiful, elegant European wife. The rumor in the wine trades was that he had been a high-level undercover policeman, French connection stuff, before his wine career, and his name was, I shit you not, Dante. One day Dante dropped by with a bottle, and we had a nice conversation over it. Several months later, Dante dropped by the restaurant with a bottle, and we started talking when I realized that the first conversation we had was not a conversation. It was an act. Every line, every gesture, every smile was the same. And somehow he was pulling me to say the same things I had said the first time. I thought, this is not a human. Dante looked a bit like Kevin Spacey, so I think of him as Kaiser Soze. My stepmom. She used to beat the shit out of me from the age of 2 to 17. She would do the most insidious things. Things that would F with me but would rarely leave marks. She would scream in my face, throw me around by my hair, offer to curl my hair, then accidentally clamp my whole ear with the iron, throw me downstairs, make me pick up dog shit with my bare hands, made me eat dog shit once. If I threw up, she would make me eat it, lied to psychiatrists to obtain medication for herself, and then forced me to take it, starved me. I weighed 82 pounds at 15. My father stood by and let all of this happen and would even join in on the physical abuse and loved whipping my bare ass with the buckle end of the belt. My uncle. Apparently when my mom was like 19 and he was 21, my grandma was planning to sell their cottage. My uncle heard about it by accident. He suggested everyone go out for lunch that day, and at the last minute decided not to go, saying he felt sick. My mom and grandparents went out for lunch. When they got back, the entire cottage was burnt to the ground, as in like nothing was left. Cops and firefighters got called, no one was charged, and it was deemed a freak accident. Later, my uncle was smoking on the hill and was laughing, watching the smoke. My mom asked him what was so funny, and he pointed at the cottage and implied that he started the fire. He was laughing because it wasn't worth anything anymore. We don't speak to him anymore for obvious reasons. I grew up with a group of 5 friends, myself, 3 other boys, and this girl. We got in a lot of trouble as kids, and it followed into our early adult lives. I and my one dude, kind of my best friend out of the group, I'll call him S, dropped out of high school and went to Florida. This was incredibly long ago, class of 16. Anyway, to get to the point, S ended up doing some time, 4.5 years in prison. One of the other boys in the group died in 2017, and was dating the girl in our group, I'll call her R. When S got out, we all hoped the best for him, plus he really seemed like his good old self, charismatic, fun, and lighthearted. He started dating R not long after getting out, and they got an apartment in the city we grew up in. We all used to get together and hang out all the time, getting into all kinds of shit again, but grown up, so we were more chill. We'd mostly do a little coke and play cards. We'd laugh and reminisce about all the shit we'd gotten into over the years. Caught us up on all the things that happened when he was locked up, like how the other 4 of us used to trip acid all the time. I met the girl I'm now hanging out with in college town up north a little. We went on a few double dates and it was a blast. Like the good old days, but with less trouble. S started showing some cracks, like maybe 2.5 to 3 years after getting out. Like some part of him changed. We'd be getting into trouble, nothing crazy, and be like, okay, time to call it. You know, like we're grown now and don't want to get in trouble. But he'd always be like, Dad, I don't care, about all kinds of things. I know I'm rambling at this point. It's hard to tell this story. I suck at telling stories, and there's a lot here. He and R started getting into fights. It started getting worse between them. She filed DV charges against him, and they both stopped coming around as much. When they would seem like themselves and would ask me how I was doing so good in my relationship with the chick I met with them. Before I get into what happened, I really want to emphasize that these were really good people. My childhood best friends. We'd seen it all together. We'd done it all. There was a time he was a really good person. I think he always had some issues. We all did, to be honest, but none of us were evil. I had to respond to a few calls from both of them after one of them would hit the other. I kept telling them both what would happen if they didn't move away from one another and break up. Maybe get some mental help. I quit going around because it got too difficult to see them going down the road, and believe me, I did everything I could to help them. In July of this year, I got a call from a mutual friend of R. She was missing for 2 days at work and police were trying to find her. In my heart, I knew exactly what happened. They found her body a few days later wrapped in plastic and thrown in a dumpster by a park we used to play at when we were younger. They said she was unrecognizable from decomposition and the physical trauma. They had found him the same day trying to skip town. He only recently got convicted on all counts. They got him for everything, and the soonest he could be out is like 31 years. During the trial, a lot of disturbing details came out, like that he hit her in the head with a hammer while she was in bed. They said there was a hole in her skull and that her jaw broke and folded into her face. That she couldn't be recognized by pictures. It was all over the news in my area. It was so insane to hear these things about people who were literally my best friends. To see pics of them on the TV in that light. As I type this, I still can't fathom it all. I'm leaving a lot of the over-the-top gruesome details out, but they made sure to cover them on TV. News can be brutal like that. He's got to be the scariest motherfucker I know. To this day, I can't help but imagine it and replay it over and over. I can't believe she's gone. I used to trip with her all the time. We had so many good memories throughout the years, and she didn't deserve that. I can't imagine the mind of someone evil enough to do what he did. My cousin might actually be a sociopath. He has this implosive anger, and that shit he says about women is repulsive. Talks to my grandma a lot, and she tells me things sometimes that I'm like, uh-huh. Once in 6th grade, my friend had a crush on him and gave him her number. only for him to absolutely lash out when she politely decided she wasn't interested. He's seriously just a ticking time bomb. I think he keeps getting fired for sexual harassment too. It's not stated in the family, but the stories he tells us why he was ganged up on, and because all of them synced up to get him are despicable. Once the reason given was because I told a girl I liked her shirt. No way are you put on suspension immediately and eventually terminated for just that. Creepy as ever-living F. My dad. Dude is a drunk and a coward. If he gets drunk and decides he has a problem with you, he won't come after you. Instead, he'll show up at your house while you're at work with a baseball bat and threaten to beat your wife to death. Or he'll sit outside your kid's school taking pictures of them on the playground and threaten to take them. If he does target you directly, it's usually by paying one of his drug addict buddies to show up at your house with a gun. The one time he did come for me himself, he tried to hit me with his truck. The fact that he's too much of a coward to go after men, but has no trouble beating women and children to within an inch of their lives, and I can't be with my family 24/7 when he's on the warpath, is what scares me.